Welcome everyone to Bird Bombs, helpful blast of ID info. Bird Bombs is brought to you by the Denver Field Ornithologists. I know there's a lot of familiar faces signed up, friends of mine, and that's fantastic, but there are also people that I don't know. So let me introduce myself a little bit. I'm David Suddjian, and I'm not an expert, but I play one for DFO. No, but seriously, I've been birding for 39 years, and most of that time, the first 30 years of it, I was in California as a birder, and I miss it a lot. Everything's birding's a little bit better in California, and Mexican food is definitely better in California. But the last 9 years, my home here has been in Colorado, and so it's great to see a contingent of California people signed up. And also a lot of friends from Colorado and new friends as well. So all along in that time, I've been leading field trips and in different ways, really enjoying sharing with people about birds and helping them to learn. So this is really a great time for me tonight. I'm really excited about beginning this Bird Bombs. So what is Bird Bombs? So Bird Bombs is a concise, targeted blast. It's just going to be about 30 minutes, if I can do it, that's the goal, a burst of information to help you identify and experience our birds. So do you like our series name? I have to credit my wife, Susan, for coming up with that. I thought it was pretty clever. Our topics will mostly be pertinent to the bird year. So Bird Bombs will choose topics of the season. To help you anticipate and get ready to see the birds that we have coming up in the coming weeks or right now. And so our context is going to be Colorado, and more specifically a little bit the Front Range region where many of us who are attending live and where I am. And that's where DFO is centered. But Bird Bombs is going to be of interest to everybody because we're talking about the basics of bird identification. And so everybody's welcome, and I hope everybody will find something here that's going to be fun and good for them. So tonight, as we go through our presentation, I'm going to use a PowerPoint and eBird, and I'll be sharing my screen for those. And there will be a quiz at the end. So I'm giving you fair warning. It's time to get out that pad and pen and be ready to take some notes. And you will get to use Zoom's poll feature to make your choices on our quiz. And then we'll have some time at the end for questions and answers. So please do submit questions and comments as we go. Our DFO Vice President Sharon is our Q&A captain tonight and will be helping me later on to sort through some of the many questions that we hope we get so we can answer some good things. So, okay, bombs away. As soon as I can figure out how to share. All right. There we go. Let's spring into warblers. What a great way to begin. So our warblers, you know, everybody loves them. There's the color, the beauty, the variety, the fantastic migrations they make, their songs, you know, and our warblers go away for half the year. So each year, let me start my show here if I can. I'm gonna make my slideshow go live. I'm not sure why. So each year we get to enjoy having these guys come back to us, and we get to learn anew and to relearn and to learn some new things each time we encounter them. So right now, here in late April, we have warbler migration finally underway here in Colorado. Colorado, things go slowly. and we're only now moving toward the peak of the season. It's wonderful back in California. The warblers come in nice and early with our first ones like orange-crowned warbler in late February, and then several others in March, and the rest of them are already there pretty much. But here in Colorado, we have to wait. And so if you've been out and about, you've probably seen yellow-rumped warblers and maybe a few others, yellow-rump maybe in some decent numbers, but we still have to wait. And so it's not till the middle of May that we're going to get to some good diversity. So we're still climbing that curve. One note I want to make on tonight's presentation. You know, if you've been out with me, that I love birding by ear and I love songs and calls and all that. But tonight, even though they are very important for Warbler ID, I've chosen to focus just on the visual aspects of these birds to help me kind of manage our 30 minutes format as I'm just starting this out. So I won't say too much tonight about the warbler, what the warblers say, but I will share on that another time. So we're talking tonight about the New World wood warblers. So the Parulidae. These are different from the Old World warblers, different family. And our Parulidae are small warblers. These are small birds, and they're mostly very active. And many of them are very colorful. Not all of them, but a lot of them are. And that's part of why we love them so much. Many have a dramatic seasonal plumage change, where they'll molt from a breeding plumage into a non-breeding plumage that's very different. And there are differences between the sexes in many species. Warblers are insectivorous, eating insects and small invertebrates. Some also eat fruit and nectar at different times of the year in different places. So those are also important resources for warblers. And many are migratory, traveling, some of them thousands of miles in these spectacular migrations that you've probably learned about, such as the Blackpoll warbler, traveling over the ocean for such great distances. Some of the migrations are much shorter, but many have these dramatic travels that they make. The warblers are generally territorial on their breeding grounds. Certainly all the ones that we experience are. And they then are separated here and there in pairs, but during migration, they gather in flocks, sometimes mixed flocks. So you have a different experience at that time. And warblers are of special interest because they are indicators of habitat quality, where there are good conditions over large areas of the landscape. Then warbler populations can do pretty well. And some have particular habitat needs that need to be met. So monitoring their population trends is a good indication of things that are going on in our environment. So raise your hand. I can't see your hands, but raise your hand if you have seen all three of these guys. Yep, most of you have probably seen maybe the lower two, or some of you, but the upper one maybe not. So that's a pink-headed warbler from Guatemala. The other two, Cape May and Northern Parula. So how many different kinds of warblers are there? So there's about 118 different species. It's a fairly sizable family, and they're only found in the New World. And 56 species occur in the US and Canada. So that's occupying kind of a large chunk there on our checklist. Pretty good warbler diversity. And you know, here in Colorado, we've had 47 different species of warblers. Now, some of those occur regularly and you can predictably go and find and enjoy, but many of them are rare here. Some rare but predictable. We're going to have a small number of, for example, chestnut-sided warblers showing up. Others much more rare and more occasional, such as things like our golden-crowned warbler that showed up several years ago in May. So there are 11 species that nest in Colorado in large numbers, meaning not like just small numbers of very local birds. Two do occur in small numbers: Lucy's warbler, northern water thrush, for example, very local distributions. And there are several other eastern species that have nested only occasionally in Colorado: yellow-throated warbler, and others where there may be one or two breeding records. But we have 11 species that are relatively common. And so tonight in Bird Bombs, we're going to focus on 7 species. Here they are: orange-crowned warbler, Virginia's warbler, MacGillivray's warbler, yellow-rumped warbler, yellow-rumped warbler, black-throated gray warbler, and Wilson's warbler. Okay, so I've got our banding codes on there just to put them on there. We won't be looking more at those, but it's good to know our 4-letter codes, right? And so whenever we're going to talk about identifying warblers and things, we have to work from a foundation. And so the most important foundation is this thing, this SND, status and distribution. What occurs when and where and why? So when we're out in the field, you know, I'm always talking about the timing of movements of birds and their distributions and particular habitats or other resources that are important for them. This provides the context of how we come to understand what to expect and to help us appreciate when something is not meeting our expectations, and to help us actually define some of the more unusual species. So the pro tip tonight, number one, is SND is the foundation of all good birder know-how. So you want to pay attention to the context when you're out birding all the time. And so let's take a little look at that. So Colorado's common breeding warblers. Here's our 7 focal species here that I've highlighted in orange on the left. And we have 4 other of those common breeding warblers that we won't spend any more time on really beyond this slide and the next one tonight. They're great species, but they have more limited distributions. And so we won't focus too much on those. So we see orange crown Virginia, MacGillivrays, yellow-rump, black-throated gray, and Wilson's all lined up there. And we can see their scientific names in the center there and get a sense of some of their relationships. We have 5 different genera that are represented by these 11 common breeding Colorado warblers. And we see that several of them are in this genus Setophaga, which is a rather large warbler genus. Now, if you go back in field guides that aren't very old, or other resources that may be only 15 or 20 years old, you'll see different scientific names for many of the warbler species. There's been a lot of shifting around. So resources, you know, even going back like in this 3-book Warblers by Dunn and Garrett, the scientific names aren't the same. Of course, it's still very useful, but those kind of things have changed. But we see 5 different genera represented here, and their Colorado breeding ranges are given on the right side. And what we notice is that there's only 2 species that are widespread breeders in Colorado, and that is the yellow warbler and the common yellowthroat. Yellow warbler are very numerous in many different areas. Yellowthroat, because of its habitat needs, is much more patchy in its distribution. But only 2 are widespread. Most of them have a western distribution in Colorado, meaning the central and western portion of the state, and a western distribution overall. So Colorado is mostly a western state in its avian biogeography. And so we see that western flavor expressed pretty well in this list of common breeding warblers. There are a few that are more limited in their distribution that are on the list here. Grace's warbler, occupying the southwest quadrant of the state, in particular habitats in the American redstart and the ovenbird that occupy the area right along the Front Range edge in pretty local areas within the state. And those guys are disjunct from the other areas where they occur in the US. So you have to go a long ways to really encounter other areas, for example, where the redstarts are if you're going towards the east and things. So those are kind of neat. Okay, so what about Colorado breeding habitats? We're going to spend just a little time on this slide. And, you know, since these programs are going to be recorded and are being recorded, and they'll be archived on our DFO page, you can go back and look at some of the details here to help fill in some of this information, or use this as a resource if you would like to. As you consider the different habitats that are primarily occupied by warblers in Colorado, we see that many species depend on forest and woodland habitats as a principal habitat, and that riparian and shrubland habitats are important for a lot of different warblers. So that's really good to think about in terms of conservation and where you're going to find these things. So what can eBird tell us about our Colorado status and distribution? So here's a little pro tip. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but it shows you how to get to explore some information that's contained in the bar graphs, in case you're unfamiliar with that. And I'm hoping that I can switch my screen and that now we're looking at eBird. And I've already set this up. I've gone in and made, I've chosen to show a bar graph going through Explore and then to bar graphs. And I've chosen Colorado and then particular counties in Colorado from the Front Range metro area, actually all the way from El Paso up to Larimer and including the metro area is my data source here. And so when I did that bar chart, I could look at the graphs and I could go down to a species I was interested in. In this case, I chose Yellow-rumped Warbler and I chose the graph symbol next to the name of the yellow rump. And it gives me a graph. And then I chose, as laid out in that pro tip on the prior slide, these other species to show as well. So now we're going to look at some data here. And so this is eBird data. And so we can start with these bar charts here and see what they're telling us about the distribution of some of these focal species. So I've chosen orange-crowned warbler, Virginia warbler, yellow warbler, yellow-rumped, and Wilson's warbler. And right away we can see that except for the yellow-rumped warbler, most of them only occur during the nesting season and the migration times and are absent more or less from Colorado. Otherwise, only the yellow-rumped has a presence in Colorado of any significance during the wintertime. And we see that a lot of the species have kind of these pulses. These are the migratory times when the numbers of the warblers are greater in Colorado and they're more frequently detected. And so we can see these migratory pulses of spring and fall. But we see that most of these species, not all of them, not this top one, have a strong presence during the central June, July time. That's the nesting season for our warblers. And so we see, and we can learn right away that the orange-crowned warbler in the area that I've chosen here, which is our Front Range region, it doesn't really nest here. So you have migrants coming through here in the spring and in the fall, but hardly any around during the nesting season when, with some exceptional occurrences, maybe they're pretty much not breeding here. They're to the west in Colorado. And then species like Virginia's warblers that arrive and breed and go away, and they don't seem to change a whole lot. We'll talk a little more about that. Our yellow warbler, sort of similar with a strong breeding presence, a very common breeding warbler. And the yellow-rumped, a little more limited distribution in the mountains, but also very common in the Wilsons. Notice the Wilsons looks a little different than the other in that it has a big bulge here out on the side. So let's look at these graphs for a second. This part's really actually very important because the timing of things helps us to really appreciate what's going on. Warblers don't all just come here and pass through and go away as a monolithic group. Each species has its timing. Some of them overlap a lot. Some are more on the outliers. Like, for example, here we see this big yellow line is the Yellow-rumped Warbler. And we notice that it's peaking ahead of all these other species that I've shown. The other four species peak later. Or actually here, one of them, the orange-crowned is right in that same week. But those two are on the earlier side. And we see some of these others a little later. You'll notice that to get from the yellow-rumped peak to the purple Wilson's warbler peak, it's a whole 1, 2, 3 weeks of time. So our yellow-rumped warblers are actually going to be peaking just in the coming days in this first week of May. And then the Wilson's warbler not peaking until the third week of May. So there's reasons for those differences. And I think one in the case of the Wilson's warbler is that they nest in montane riparian areas that aren't so available earlier in terms of snow cover and so on. But we have those kinds of differences. And notice also that here we're looking at frequency. So that's how often they're reported on checklists. We can switch here to, we see that the yellow rump is far and away the most frequent. This is going to correlate with abundance of birds. And we see that numerically, the yellow rump warbler is much more common, twice the number of the yellow. And then the yellow is much more common than these other ones we're looking at, which are relatively uncommon comparatively. But if we get rid of that yellow rump, so I'm going to go to change species, and we'll only spend a little more time here, but this is really valuable. We'll get rid of that so we can better appreciate the numbers of some of these. And we see, so we got rid of that big peak, and now we just have the yellow warbler as our most common. Here's orange crown coming in a little earlier and then not nesting, so its line goes way down. Look what happens with the Virginia's warbler. It peaks here with migrants, and then it kind of stays steady, but it doesn't have any peak later in the year of fall migrants. That's because there really aren't very many Virginia's warblers north of the area that I'm graphing here. They don't really get north of the Front Range. They're a Great Basin species off to our west, and so they're not really passing through in the fall here. But the Wilson's warbler is kind of interesting, the yellow line. Notice they have a relatively low peak in the spring here in the Front Range region, and then a much I get rid of that. A much higher peak in the fall. So that's different from these other species in that it's actually more abundant in the fall than the others are. So I'm going to get rid of this here and see if I can switch back to my presentation. This is the right one. Okay, so see if I can get my here. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what we want to look at on warblers. I'm going to look at the time real quick, and I see I'm running short, of course, so I'm going to go forward here. So we have here black-throated gray and the yellow and the MacGillivrays. And we notice that I'm just going to leave behind some of the basics and focus on a few things. So warblers can have strong face patterns. We want to notice that. Sometimes they're plain faced, like this yellow warbler. And sometimes they have like a hood or a large area of the head that's covered with a particular color. It's like on this MacGillivray's warbler is a full hood. We have wing bars to look at. Here we have two white wing bars on this black-throated gray warbler. Notice the yellow warbler here also has wing bars, but they're less distinct. They're basically a similar color to the wing panel there. And we can see here easily how those wing bars are formed. They're from the tips of the median and greater upper wing coverts there. And here in this yellow warbler, we can appreciate the light feather tracks of the primary, secondaries, and tertials, lots of details to look at. So the wing bars are those tips of the upper wing coverts, and sometimes there's no wing bars like on the MacGillivray's warbler. There may be a supercilium, and that's a line that forms over the eye and generally proceeds back from the eye area. And then auricular patch is usually a darker colored area or a differently colored area that's around the ear. So the auriculars are the ears. So black-throated gray warbler has a prominent auricular patch. Eyes can have crescents or arcs over and under them, like these prominent ones on the MacGillivrays. And there could be streaking on the underparts. And a lore spot, these are the lores, and some warblers have a distinctive color there, like our black-throated gray. So some other things. What about a complete eye ring, like on this beautiful Virginia's warbler? The Wilson's warbler also has an eye ring, but it's a yellow eye ring surrounded by yellow, and it really doesn't show up very well, except for where the feathers on the auriculars and around the lower part of the eye give a little bit of contrast where they're a little more dusky. But it has an eye ring too, and that's important to note. Sometimes there are eye arcs, as I was saying with the MacGillivrays. So these eye arcs on this orange-crowned warbler here are not very distinct, but there are brighter ones here on this MacGillivray's warbler. And notice there's an eye line on this orange-crowned warbler. The arcs are there because they're separated by this dusky eye line. So it's a distinctive feature often when there's arcs. It could be a crown patch, very bold one that never goes away, like on the Wilson's warbler, or sometimes a less obvious one like on the Virginia's warbler, or sometimes the crown patch on males can be hidden. The orange-crowned warbler, for example, has that name, but you very rarely see the orange on the crown. It's good to look at the leg color of warblers. So let's kind of recap here just a little bit with these two yellow-rumped warblers. And we can see wing bars formed by those covert tips. We see a throat patch and an auricular patch. In this case, kind of an eye arc effect, a little supercilium. Here's a crown patch. We see some colors on the sides and across the breast. This is the undertail coverts here, okay, and on this guy. All right, so let's begin with a little quick look at the yellow-rumped warbler. These guys are conifer forest birds and also favoring areas with edges and clearings around forests. We have two different subspecies that used to be full species and maybe yet again, the myrtle and the audubons. The audubons nest in Colorado. The myrtle we just have moving through during the migration times. And there are a lot of hybrid warblers, or intergrades, more technically. They're common in the spring in migration here in Colorado, along the Front Range in particular, and areas to the east of the mountains. And males are generally much more marked than females. So the butterbutt, the yellow rump, easy ID mark. Yellow and black at the breast at this time if birds are in breeding plumage, and a white or a yellow throat and prominent tail spots, white tail spots. The myrtle warbler is the one with the white throat. And notice that it wraps around the bottom part of the auricular patch in this distinctive way, giving that nice contrast there. And there is an auricular patch that's contrasty and has a short little supercilium. The wing bars on the myrtle warbler are distinctly too. All right, but let's take a look at the Audubons. Here we have a yellow throat, and the throat patch has a different shape because it doesn't extend back below the auricular patch, so it's more contained to the throat proper. So than on the myrtle, and the male has more extensive black underneath on the under parts in the myrtle, and no supercilium really or distinct auricular patch. Often the male's wing bars, it varies a little bit from individual to individual, but they can extend, they have much more extensive white, and it almost forms like one big broad wing bar. The female here on the left of the suet is much drabber. She still has the yellow throat though, and the butterbutt. But here in the Front Range, we have a lot of hybrid myrtle bonds, you might call them. Myrtle and Audubon hybrids or intergrades. Intergrade because they're not full species right now, considered that, but hybrids essentially if they were. And if you look carefully, one of the best, easiest things to look at is the throat patch. To notice that they're not actually yellow or white, but they're often a little bit splotchy yellow and kind of washed out yellow. And so you need to look a little carefully, but when you start to do that, you see there are quite a lot of hybrids. So another of our focal species is the yellow warbler. This is one of my favorites, and I haven't yet seen one this season, I don't think, and I'm really looking forward to that. And this is a bird of riparian and shrublands, also urban areas, often around water. And they are, quote unquote, all yellow. Not really, because they do have some dark areas, but they have yellow pretty much all over the place. They even have a yellow eye ring. It just doesn't contrast much, but it's there. And sometimes it's good for some, for some individuals. They have yellow wing bars. And they have yellow to the tip of the tail. It's actually parts of the yellow tail spots, but you see yellow going all the way out to the tip of the tail. Males have the red streaking in breeding time, and the females sometimes a little bit of that as well, but not much. They have kind of a plain-faced look. So you can see here on several of these, the yellow going way out to the tip of the tail. So when you're under the bird looking up in the tree and you see that yellow all the way out to the tip, that's different from these other warblers and really from others in general. Even other mostly yellow warblers like a Prothonotary doesn't have that. Maybe you don't see the whole bird. Sometimes you get to see the tail well, maybe not the vent. You never know. There's leaves in the vent. So it's always good to think about those kind of lagging features. So yellow to the tip of the tail and just yellow all over. Nice look at the yellow wing bars. Females are drabber and just generally paler all around. But also the same yellow to the tip of the tail and yellow everywhere else. You notice the upper parts are really kind of an olivey yellow or greenish yellow. And so orange crown warbler. This guy is kind of neat because there's some differentiation in different parts of the country in terms of how they look. And the ones that we see mostly in Colorado are gray-headed types like the one above here. And then there are some brighter ones that we could maybe see, but they're kind of rare here and more common to the west. And so this is a species of shrubland and riparian areas, aspen, oak, areas with dense understory. You see them down low in the shrubs. And so we have the gray-headed Orestera and the Salata forms that occur in Colorado. The Orestera one is the one that passes through, most especially being more associated with and breeding extensively in the western part of Colorado. And then the brighter lutescens is one that is further west mostly, but we see some bright ones here sometimes. Notice the orange crown warbler has off-white eye arcs divided by an indistinct dusky line. When I see these guys and I see their face, their dusky eye line and an off-white eye arc is always distinctive. the dusky eyeline has a distinctive look to it. It really doesn't stand out, and sometimes you have to look carefully, but it's there, and it sets off those little eye arcs that aren't white, but they tend to be kind of not white. Right? And so there's faint blurred streaks on the breast that can be hard to see in some circumstances. No wing bars, yellow undertail coverts, but the tail's not yellow. So you want to distinguish what you're looking at there. And so here we have some birds in some typical different poses. And sometimes when the lighting's not so great, like in this one in the upper right, they can look pretty drab. And so, but still I can see that dusky eyeline there separating those eye arcs. And the same thing in these pictures. You can see the yellow on the undertail coverts, but you can see the tail here is actually kind of an olivey, grayish brown. All right, so Wilson's Warbler, another one of my favorites. I have seen this already this year. These guys here in Colorado, they breed in montane, riparian, and shrublands, and they're up kind of high, generally above 9,500 feet, and especially in the upper areas of willow cars and things up all the way up toward tree line. As long as the willows have a little bit of height, you can find the Wilson's Warblers. And they are really bright mustard yellow underneath and greenish above with this black cap. They have the black cap all the time. Some females are pretty drab on the cap, but most show it. And young birds later in the year may be lacking it entirely or have only a little bit, but most have a nice, well-defined black cap. And with a kind of a blank face with a big beady eye and a large headed look. Notice they do have a yellow eye ring. There's no wing bars, no streaks underneath, and the tail's not yellow, but it's this olivey and grayish olive, right? And when they're foraging, they're often moving their tail around, kind of flipping it around while they're foraging. So that's kind of a distinctive action. In fact, the lower left-hand bird, you can see his tail kind of cocked up, and it's probably in the course of doing that. As we see these Wilson's Warblers, top bird with a little crown that's a little less distinct than, say, the lower right-hand bird that's snatching that little insect. MacGillivray's Warbler likes dense understory near water. And you can see they like to sing. Slate gray hood that's black at the breast, bright white eye arcs, and blackish or black lores. And there's no eyeline, no wing bars, no streaking. Females are drabber. Here's a female in the upper left. And just threw in a mourning warbler down there on the right, because that's a very closely related species that looks very similar. Females in particular between the two, but in the males, you see he doesn't have the white eye arcs of the MacGillivrays, and there's some other subtle differences. So Virginia's Warbler is one that is occupying kind of drier settings, especially more open woodland and areas with dense scrub. And Virginia's Warbler has a complete white eye ring with a wash of yellow at the breast. And it is kind of really a wash. It's not like a distinct patch. It's kind of like you took some watercolor and painted it on there. And also some yellow on the undertail and on the rump. So they have gray underparts, no streaking, no wing bars. And the female is duller with less yellow, like the one in the upper left in this view here. You can see that bold white wing bar, eye ring showing out real well. They have a little russet crown patch there that's not very prominent. If you have a good look at the male and he's in a good mood, then you can see that pretty well. But otherwise, it can be hard to see. And the Nashville Warbler is thrown in here as one that's kind of rare here in Colorado, but we do get them. And they have a gray hood, but they're all yellow underneath. So not like the gray underparts of the Virginias. But here's one of my favorites, and I think it's our last focal species here that we're looking through real quick. Our black-throated gray warbler. This is a warbler of drier woodland settings. Here in Colorado, they specialize in PJ. So for those of you who aren't here, that's not peanut butter and jelly, that's pinyon and juniper. And so there's a woodland type that's very extensive over the western part of the state. And the black-throated grays really do dote on that. They are black, white, and gray warblers. And they have a black crown that does not have any central stripe or anything, and a black auricular patch. A yellow lower spot, males and females, female here on the right, male on the left. This male we just saw out at Crow Valley a couple weeks ago. And the male has this nice black throat patch. The female has white and black, usually black along the base, sometimes forming like a little net patch. And she's grayer overall. All right, so there's a mostly gray back that's not really having much in the way of prominent streaking and unstreaked on the vent there. So black-throated gray here you see in some junipers in a couple of these shots. And it seems like a pretty easy bird to distinguish. We do have another species in Colorado that's the same color palette. That is our black and white warbler. It's rarer, but we do see them, particularly along the Front Range edge and to the east over the prairie. Notice they have markings on the undertail coverts where the black-throated gray is blank, and they have a central white crown stripe where the black-throated gray is all black on the crown, and some other details, including their behavior, black-throated, black and white creeping along branches and things, very different from the behavior of the black-throated gray. So now it's quiz time, and I'm going to go to our polls. I know we're running a little long, but we're going for it here. So if I can make our poll work here, and I'm going to launch a poll here. And you get to, hopefully, my poll list is blocking my picture of the bird. So I see some votes coming in, and we'll end the poll in a bit. These are not going to be very hard, mostly. I see so far opinions are just over a couple choices here, maybe a couple others. We'll see what's going on. So what I see here is an all yellow bird, and I see a yellow eye ring, and I see yellow wing bars, and I see yellow out there on the tail. And so end this poll here and share our results. Hey, everybody got it pretty good there. It is a yellow warbler. And stop sharing that and see if I can get to our next poll here, but now I have to figure out how to get my screen to advance, so bear with me. I lost my, okay, there's our yellow. Okay, so here's number 2 here, and I'm going to launch the poll. And we have 5 different choices here. We have options of Nashville, for me, female Virginia, male Virginia, Orange County, and yellow. And it looks like votes are still coming in. This is a pretty little guy. I haven't seen one of these yet this year, but they should be coming in about a week, a little more maybe, in places I might go. So I'm going to end the poll here, and I'll share the results. And we came up with Virginia Warbler male. I agree with that. A nice bright patch of yellow here, and of course a fair bit of reddish chestnut up on the crown. We can't really see too well back here to assess further, but I think that sounds pretty good. So I didn't want to do that. So. Okay, so I'm going to try to continue here if I can. And okay, so putting up number 3 here and see if I can get to poll. Okay, here we go for poll number 3. Had a chance to look at the picture. And this one we see right away, it's a pretty strong response there. These are too easy. So I need to do Impedinax flycatchers. Wide-mouthed warbler is definitely a good choice for this guy. But we can end the poll here and see what our results look like. Indeed, the overwhelming choice was Wilson's warbler. Now we can't see his black cap very well, but we can see a little bit. And notice there's no yellow out here on the tail like the yellow warbler would have. Maybe we couldn't see that black cap. That'd be one way we could tell this is a Wilson's away from any of our other species. No dusky eyeline or eye arcs like on the orange crown. All right, so I'm gonna go forward here to our next picture, and our next poll is now up. And we've got here a colorful little warbler. All right, so last few moments to vote here, and we're gonna see we have a kind of a good split here. So let's take a look. We're gonna end our poll. I'm gonna share the results, and I see unlike the others, we have some different opinions. We have a myrtle male has a strong showing, a myrtle female or Audubon female has a strong showing, and then the Myrtle-bond warbler, and that's the correct answer. It's the Myrtle-bond. A Myrtle Audubon integrator hybrid. You can see the bits of yellow here on the throat if you look real careful. So integrate Audubon Myrtle. And here's our next picture here. And let's see if I can our next poll. We've got this one and one more to go. So enjoy here. So I've launched the poll. This is a pretty bird. All right, so we'll end this and I'll share our results. Again, we have a mixed opinion here, and the last option, this is a trick question, may be the right one. You know, it looks a lot like a yellow warbler, which was selected, but look how not yellow it is on the wings and the back, which is green. And we can't really see back here too well, but around the tail, I see some white. And this is a prothonotary warbler. So if you didn't see the bird real well and you saw the front part, you might get fooled. But there's other differences. The bill is different and so on. But a little fun there. So I'm going to now go to our last quiz picture, stop sharing that and put up our last poll. There you go. So take a close look at this fellow. This is kind of a neat picture because you can see well all the features that are important for IDing this little one. Of course, when you see it in real life, it's not going to stay hanging there so long. So you got to look fast. All right, so I'm going to end our poll and I'll share the results. And we see correct choice got the majority there, the orange-crowned warbler. Notice the dusky eye line breaking those two eye arcs, which are not real prominent. They look pretty bright in the shaded sort of view there. And you can even see the dusky streaks on the breast and the yellow going out the undertail coverts, but not onto the tail. All right, so, oops, I didn't share the results, but there they are, I think. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna pull there and see if we can proceed. One bit. So there's our final bit. Okay, so we're at the end of our time here tonight, and I'm still going to stay on for question and answer, of course, but I want to give some credit to these friends who have helped provide some pictures tonight. Really grateful for that. And thanks a lot for being a part of this inaugural Bird Bombs. I hope it was fun and informative. If you have ideas for Bird Bombs topics, I want to learn them. I have a lot of ideas, and you can be a valued photo contributor. If you'd like to be, you can contact me and let me know, and I'll tell you specifically what I want. And I've got some very specific ideas of photos I'd like to have people share with me so that I can use them for these Bird Bombs. We do have a next Bird Bomb scheduled May 19th at 7 p.m. and it's Kings of the Road and Friends. And so you can kind of think about what that's going to be about. It's going to help us get ready to really enjoy the things that we encounter out along the highways and byways, right? So do visit dfobirds.org. Consider a gift membership or a new membership at DFO, or maybe making a donation to DFO. I'm going to stop the screen share here, and we're going to hopefully have some questions.
Thanks, David. It was very fun. So we do have a couple questions. One of them is, What did you mean in talking about habitat by west of prairie? What
Okay,
would
so
that be?
the prairie kind of washes up like an ocean up against the base of the Front Range. It's a very interesting interaction. I'm very fascinated by it. And so if you take away the urban settings that have kind of changed the landscape a little bit, you basically have the grass settings coming up to where the foothills actually start, basically around where I live, at the hogbacks. In some areas there may be other habitat extending out away from the mountains. And then once you get into the foothills and on up into the mountains, it's basically that whole thing. So I'm distinguishing basically grass environment from other.
Great, thanks. So in looking at the migration charts that you put up, what's the reason why the Wilson's Warbler migration peaks in the fall as opposed to the spring?
So I did show graphs that were for the Front Range region where the Wilson's Warbler is mostly absent as a breeder. There are some in some areas in the higher areas of Boulder and Larimer, for example. So it is represented there, but a little more underrepresented if I had gone for the whole mountain area. So I'm just saying that. But I think it's just that they do have a broad breeding distribution to the north of Colorado. And in the fall, there are a lot of younger birds that are moving. And it could be that a lot of the birds that are moving north in the spring are not necessarily moving along the Front Range area, but are moving through in a little different area and bypassing Colorado to get north. So we're just encountering a different set of population. I don't know the dynamics of the movement, but that is very consistent with the much bigger fall peak, which happens in September.
So one of our participants saw Wilson's Warblers in Littleton in the fall. Would that be consistent with that fall migration pattern?
Right. So they occur kind of widespread in the fall once we get into the time when they're numerous.
Yeah. Okay. And then someone noticed a Townsend's Warbler at Bar Lake yesterday, which seemed kind of unusual. Is that?
So the Townsend's Warbler is a close relative of the black-throated gray. They breed in the Pacific region, in the Cascades and in that area. And they are rare but regular in spring in Colorado. We see a small number. They're more numerous and much easier to find in the fall migration, so August into September, principally here in Colorado. So in the spring, it's kind of a treat to see a Townsend's Warbler, but not unexpected. It's one of those ones that we look for.
Great. Well, I now have my short list of warblers I'm going to be looking for, but I'm wondering, it's really helpful to know what to expect in the area and what the habitat is where you're going to see them, and of course the field marks. But what's your advice for learning more about spring warblers? Is song a good does that help you find the birds and help you ID the birds, or are there songs too similar to make that a good?
No, the songs are great. There's two things. One, as warblers are migrating through, a lot of them are not singing as they're passing through. They're not on tune yet. There's some song, but it may not be full song. So it can be a challenging time because a lot of the birds are a little quieter. But when you get into areas where they're going to nest, like as I go up into the forest near here, I'm going to encounter birds that are arriving on their breeding territories and singing. So song is definitely important and a really good thing to focus on. But migration happens quickly here. And most of it's going to be in a period of 3 weeks. So you got to get out there while these birds are moving through. You got to get out there in the middle part of May. And that's the best time to encounter them. And that's the best way to learn, is to actually have field encounters. DFO has a lot of different field trips and spring counts happening right in that window. So a lot of great opportunities to get out with people to help you learn. Another great way to learn is to share with others on field trips, take advantage of the leader's knowledge and the others that can help find birds and identify them. I think you can learn a lot through eBird about kind of what to expect and all of that, but really getting in the field with people that know is special.
Super. Well, thanks a lot, David. Thanks to everybody who showed up, and we'll see you again on the 19th.
Excellent. Good night, everyone. Thank you very much.
Good night.